Welcome to the Driven to Succeed Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Olson, and today I have a great guest in Cara Quinn from Sette Colli Brokerage. It's
Correct.
your own brokerage.
It is.
Um, Cara, we just did a transaction together, and I thought you'd be a fantastic guest on the show. And we were talking this morning a little bit already, and I'm super excited because I want people to know what your journey was. So Sette Colli is Italian,
That's right.
right? Your husband's Italian,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
And your journey and just even how you got married is kind of interesting.
That it is. That it
So
is.
let's talk about
Okay.
that. You lived in Italy
Yeah.
for a decade, you
Yep.
said,
Just
right?
about a decade. I went to Italy in the early 1990s just to travel around a little bit, experience a different culture. And I actually traveled in all of Europe and got to Italy, got to Rome in particular. Absolutely loved it. And just found excuse after excuse to stay and prolong my trip. Until, yeah, eventually my husband and I met, and we were married there in 1996. Our oldest son was born in Rome in 2000. And then, that changed a little bit. Rome is such an amazing city when you're young and, single or a young couple without kids, and you really live the city. But family life is a little bit different. And at that point, we'd come back to Minnesota to visit, and you'd look at, even housing costs. You'd look at housing costs, and, people our age were in really well-paying jobs and buying big houses with these bright green lawns. And, life in Rome is really different. And
Yeah,
so we took the plunge and decided to move back to Minneapolis and start new careers and raise our family here.
awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome. And you toyed with getting into real estate,
I
but then you're
did.
like, I need to maybe have a better
Yep.
job. So you went into education,
Yep,
right?
exactly. Yep. As I was saying, when we moved here, Europe had just transitioned to the euro. And but we really, our savings were in lira, Italian lira, which weren't worth a lot in dollars
Yeah.
back at the time. And I actually interviewed. I reached out to a couple of brokers and talked about obtaining my real estate license, and really just felt at that stage of our lives with, a husband who'd left everything and come to the United States, didn't even have really solid English at that point in time. I really felt the obligation to ensure a regular paycheck
All
at
right.
that point. And so, as much as I loved it, I kind of put that dream on hold. But my husband actually came from a background. He worked with his dad and his uncle and other family members in a fairly high-end residential and commercial remodeling company in Rome. And they did some really high-end work. And so my husband was the one who taught me, walking around Rome, he always said, don't look down, look up. You have to look up, look up at the buildings, look up in the windows and look at the ceilings and some of these
Where
beautiful
you have this great
apartments.
architecture, and that's
Exactly.
what Italy's
Yep.
known for.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Man. That's a
Yeah.
that's a great
Yeah.
background.
Yeah. So we love that. My husband started working with an Italian American company here doing kind of natural stonework, both residential and commercial. And we did the occasional real estate investment. We flipped a couple of properties and loved it while we were holding down regular jobs and raising our family and all of that. And, fast forward not quite 20 years, and suddenly we're looking at being empty nesters, really wanting to be able to be in a position where we can spend a little bit more time back in Italy. So in 2019, in 2019, I was a school administrator, no idea that the pandemic was coming. But I decided to work with my board of directors at that time to create an exit strategy for myself. And I obtained my real estate license and began working in real estate. And then 2 years later, my husband and I also obtained a general contractor license and started our company, Sette Colli, which has two branches, a home remodeling branch and then a real estate branch.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So you
Fun journey.
you know with having that Italian background
Yeah.
and that architecture
Yep.
work, I bet
Yep.
you have he's done some cool projects for people.
Yeah, we really love it. On the real estate side, it's an asset. It's an asset to be a realtor and have that kind of general contracting hat, both in terms of, just helping clients take a look at the house and what do you, what do you love about this house right now, but what do you envision for the house in 10 years? And even
Right.
being able to talk a little bit about, what that might entail and what some of the costs might be. And sometimes our real estate clients become our remodeling clients, sometimes our remodeling clients become our real estate clients. The other thing I love about that on the real estate side is when I list a house, when you hire me to list a house, you get the realtor, but you also get my home remodeling crew. And part of my listing services are, we will bring our crew in to take care of things that need taking care of, and kind of work with you to make that a reality. Because my real estate strategy, I really want your house to be the best in its category. I really
Right.
do. It's just
Right.
that's what makes sense to me,
Yeah.
to have your house look really good, present really well. Yep.
And that's where you're gonna get the multiple offers situations.
Exactly.
Like it's
Yep.
funny now because I
Yep.
mean it's very interesting to watch the transformation this year
Yeah.
from last year
Yeah.
and the year before,
Yeah.
right? And now houses are sitting on the market a
A
little bit
little bit
longer, right?
longer.
Even though
Yep.
rates have come down,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's going through the whole NAR settlement. That's
Yes.
like, I have a feeling that's scaring off buyers.
For
Like, oh, I have
sure.
to pay my own closing
Yep.
costs. I can't afford.
Yep.
They've done
Yep.
everything to scare people off
Yep.
right now.
Yep. Yep.
And it's funny because I bring issue with that.
Yeah.
It's not changing mostly, what always took place before. Now it's more transparent,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
And, I've talked about it on this podcast with other people. It's like, okay, if you're gonna sell, but you're gonna refuse to pay any buyer's agent commission, you're gonna knock out a lot of people
Up.
from
Yep.
even looking at your
Yep.
house.
Yep.
So what are you gonna do,
Yep.
right? Oh, I guess we're gonna pay it,
Yeah.
but maybe we don't pay all of it. Well,
Right.
at least you can negotiate
Yeah.
that, right?
It will be very interesting to see what happens. And it has been very interesting in these weeks leading up to the date where the terms go into effect. Really talking to buyers and explaining, how this is going to work and what it's going to look like, and explaining to sellers and helping talk sellers through what makes sense. The other part of this that is interesting, and I understand why it was done, but I also think could lead to some confusion, is that if there are seller concessions, it could be the broker offering, the listing broker offering concessions to the buyer's broker, or it could be the seller offering concessions to the buyers. So who are the concessions coming from?
Right.
And then, the fact that that won't be communicated via the MLS. I think we're going to see the Wild West for a while. And
Yeah,
I think it's going to be interesting to see how things kind of fall in place. And
I agree.
yeah,
I definitely agree because I was just watching a thread in my email
yeah,
yesterday from, the NAR settlement coming in.
yeah,
Like, can the sellers pay 3% closing costs
right.
in addition to
To,
a buyer's agent?
right.
And the answer is yes,
Yes,
but it has to be defined in the purchase contract.
exactly. Yep,
If it's defined in the purchase contract, well, then it
yep,
can,
yep.
because that's the confusion part too.
Right,
If it's not defined in
right,
that, then they can't.
right.
So,
Correct. And it also can't exceed any commission requested or any commission established by the buyer's agent with the buyer in the buyer's
right.
contract. So there's
Exactly.
a lot of moving parts there.
There
Yep,
is, there is.
yep.
And that's why, oh my gosh, this is like the 77th episode, I believe, or
Uh-huh.
76. It's 76 or 77, but
Yeah,
I bet you I've talked about this 20
I
sometimes
bet
of
you have.
why, like, having a buyer's representation,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Because that's where they were when this first started, and
yep,
this came out earlier this year
yep.
or late last year, and it was like, oh, buyer's agents are going to go away. We're going to get rid of so many agents and
Right.
like blah 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 blah. Well, I think naturally, just
Yep,
because the industry has slowed down, we're getting
yep.
rid of
There might be some
some
weeding
people
out.
that are just weeding
Yep,
out just
yep.
naturally, that they just can't stay in it
Right.
and whatnot. Because there is an art to being an agent. Number
Yeah.
one,
Yep,
your people skills, and like it doesn't cut,
yep.
if markets like this, you really have to show your worth,
Absolutely.
right? And you need
Yeah,
to know what you're
fair enough,
talking about.
right? I mean, fair
Right.
enough.
And
Yep.
that should be.
Yeah, I agree.
And I've heard from people that are not in the industry and like, oh, they get paid too much money. I'm like, well, okay, number one, you think every one of these agents are paid at the top level,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of agents don't close more than 10 loans in a,
Right.
or 10 homes in a
Right.
year,
Right.
right? So if
Right.
you really break it down, do they make that much
Right.
money? No.
Right.
They're self-employed, they
Yep.
have marketing expenses,
Exactly.
office
Yep.
expenses,
Yep.
they're,
Taxes,
all that
health
stuff. Once you
insurance.
break it
Yes.
down, they're working like 20 bucks an
Yep.
hour,
Right.
right? So,
Exactly. Right.
um,
Right.
so just because you see a big number on your
Yeah.
side, it's different. So, and once I've broken that down because I've had people where like I'm doing for sale by owner and
Sure.
like I'm
Yep.
doing this and like
Yep.
this and like, okay, so do you know how to navigate
Yep.
that process?
Exactly.
Once you have an
Exactly.
inspection and
Yeah.
like, oh, all this stuff comes up on it.
Exactly. It's interesting to me as a second career realtor. I had a whole first career and, lots of degrees and lots of training and organizational leadership and those sort of things. And it is interesting as a newer to the field agent to kind of to watch this,
Right.
and to feel a little bit like I'm able to watch it as someone who hasn't been decades in the
Right.
business.
Right.
And, I actually think change change can be positive. It depends on how we handle it and how
Oh,
we
100.
spin it. But yeah, the role of the buyer's agent really is important. We were talking before the podcast started about the fact that my husband and I recently bought a property in Italy, and you pay the buyer's agent in Italy. And I am a realtor. Like, we're pretty knowledgeable. We found the property ourselves. We negotiated the purchase price ourselves. But once we had a verbal agreement with the sellers, I don't know all the ins and outs of contracts in Italy and how
Right.
everything works. And we hired a realtor, and
Right.
we spent a good amount of money paying that realtor. But in return, I knew, especially a property. Our property was built in 1823. Right? There's a lot of
Oh my
things that
gosh.
could go right. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, even around is this recorded as livable, habitable square footage, all of those sort of things. We needed a realtor.
Right.
And there's no way I would have tried to have negotiated that on my own or
Right.
handled all of those moving parts on my own.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see people realize that here, but I think it's going to take a while because buyers aren't used to having to pay their agents. And so I think it's going to take a while for that culture shift to set in.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think there's going to be a lot that just happens in the overall market right now,
agree.
right?
Yep,
I think there's a lot of moving parts at play right
yep,
now. Number one, what are rates going to do,
yep.
right? Because a lot of people are just like, hey, I'm waiting until rates
I
get
know.
lower and lower. And I'm still of the belief that in the next 18 months, we're going to have much lower rates. But once we hit fives, the rush to
Exactly.
buy
Yep.
is going to push the prices
Exactly.
up.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
I think 2 or 3 times a week, I'm talking to people right now, and it's literally like, hey, if you wait,
Yep.
this $350,000 home is going to be higher. And now you
Exactly.
can't refinance to a
Right.
lower rate.
Exactly. And you might be in bidding wars. And, if I think about my recent transactions, there have been a handful of transactions, both on the buy side and on the sell side, where there's been one offer. Like, we've gone under contract and there was a single offer, and that was unheard of,
Right.
very recently. And so, you can have a home inspection. You can negotiate some of the terms where that wasn't happening.
That's a
Right.
that's a great
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
right now, I think almost all my August closings
Uh-huh.
all have seller paid closing
Yep.
costs. We're doing 2-1 buy
Yep.
downs, so we're
Yeah.
alleviating that payment
Yep.
for them a bit.
Yep.
We got sellers, making concession. I think a couple of them. We just did a big one that was listed at 895, and
Yeah.
we got it under contract at 875 with 3% seller paid closing
Exactly.
costs. And that's a
Exactly.
huge
Yeah.
discount.
Well, and it's almost been fun because, back to that art of negotiation and problem solving and, working with the other side to try to understand the needs and the motivations of the other party, and working with lenders to help understand, okay, how can we craft this in a way that meets these needs, but also checks these boxes. And, again, that wasn't really happening. It was just throwing everything at the wall for a while.
Right. So
And
let's
yeah,
let's play that out,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
here's
yeah.
here's where we're at, and I think the rest of this year
Yep.
we're going to see, because a lot of people are nervous about the election. One way,
Yeah.
not to get one way or another
No,
on
no, no.
that,
Right.
but a lot of people are nervous on both
Yep.
sides, right?
Exactly.
And like, oh, if because there's both sides have fear mongering of
Yep.
this is going to happen if
Yep.
Trump's in, this is going to
Yep.
happen if now
Exactly.
Kamala's in. Like,
Right.
it's just
Yep.
everybody. Now you got this all this negative
I
stuff,
know.
right? But let's talk about
Yeah.
let's go into. I think the next 6 months is your premier buying.
Yep.
We're
Yep.
not going to be pushing prices up. You're going to be able, what you just talked about.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to get negotiations,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Not multiple offers,
Right.
paying way over list,
Right.
having to no inspection,
Exactly.
appraisal gap
Right.
language,
Yep.
all of that
Yep.
stuff, right?
Non-refundable earnest money. Exactly. Yep.
Correct. So, in my opinion, is today the time to buy? Yes.
Yes.
That,
Yeah.
yep. I
Agreed.
think that's,
Yep.
from the majority of people in real estate that do a lot of business,
Yep.
there's like, that's it.
Yep.
And, because it looks like we're probably going to get one or two cuts this year,
Yep.
maybe just one.
Yep.
But next year, between 3 and 6 are on the table. And if 3 of them happen in the first quarter, let's say we get one in October or November,
Yeah.
and maybe we skip December, and we get January, February, and now you have because I think there's going to be a lot of economic things happening.
Yep.
Now you're going to get those rate cuts, and now you're going to hit those fives.
Exactly.
And then by springtime next year,
Yep.
that's where now you're not in
Yep.
that position anymore.
Yep.
And now you're waiting. Okay, so maybe rates drop to low fives.
Right.
Okay, it costs money to refi.
Yep.
You're not moving your payment that much different.
Right.
But if you're buying today where they're in the, mid to upper sixes,
Right.
maybe low sevens, depending on certain situations. But now you get to 2 years from now, you're in the upper fours, low fives.
Exactly.
That $300-400 a month payment difference
Yep.
is huge.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and you're not paying that extra $30,000 for the house.
That you had to do to get the house in the
Correct.
first place. Exactly.
Correct.
Yep. Yep.
So trying to get that message out and
Yeah.
it's
The right time to buy is when it's the right time for you to make a move. I mean, it really is. And then,
Yep.
every situation is unique, and there might be some scenarios whereby no, it doesn't make sense. But most of the time, if it's the right time in your life to make a move, we can make that happen. And now's not a bad time at all, because you can shop for houses and not experience that pandemonium that we were experiencing
Yeah,
pretty recently when
I know many of my clients, let's just say, I pre-approve, 30 people,
Yep.
right? And in the height of when it's super busy in the springtime, out of those 30 people, you got half of them that don't do
didn't
anything,
even
right?
exactly.
Oh,
Yep.
it's just not,
Too much. Yep.
I want an inspection. I
Yep.
want this,
Yep.
I'm gonna wait.
Yep.
So I get it.
Yep.
It's
No,
the pressure's
too.
on,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And a lot of people feel that pressure.
Yep. Yep. Well, and there are also some really amazing incentives right now for first-time home buyers,
Right.
which is kind of remarkable, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you got first generation money.
Yep.
That's 32,000 to 35, depending on which one
Yep.
you use.
Yep.
So that's a very
Yes,
popular
it is.
program
Yeah.
right now. And
Yeah.
you only have to have the MMC program, MMCDC program.
Sure.
Only one of them has to be a first generation buyer,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
If it's a husband and wife,
Yep.
and as long as you meet the other criteria,
Yep.
only one of them,
Yep.
if your parents didn't own a home,
Right.
that's huge.
Right.
32 grand.
Yes, it
And it's forgivable.
Yeah.
You
It's
get that.
remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a
Um,
closing where the buyers literally walked away. They had cash back at
Yeah.
closing. I mean, that's amazing.
Right. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So it's you got the incentives coming, they do want to make home ownership affordable.
Mhm.
And that's the sad thing right now.
I know.
One of my last guests I had on, we talked about how he helped his children buy
Yep.
homes.
Yep.
But that's how he started his investment portfolio.
Perfect.
Right?
Yep.
Taught him about home ownership, so they
Nice.
put them on the title
Yep.
so he could buy a primary residence.
Yes. Perfect.
Yes.
Exactly.
And and this is that. I mean, that was
Yep.
fantastic. I mean, it's such a good,
Yeah.
if you get people that have kids that are, they're just teenagers right
Yep.
now, you're like, hey,
Yep.
think about this when they go to college, to buy a home for them.
Yes.
After their first year, let
Right.
them go make friends,
Right.
live in the dorms.
Right. Find their
People-
roommates.
Yes,
Yeah.
find the roommates, rent, get a 3 or 4
Exactly.
bedroom home, rent the rooms out,
Exactly.
subsidize your
Yep.
payment,
Yep.
and you can go down with 5% down.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's minimal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You don't have to have
Yep.
20% for an
Yep.
investment property.
Yep.
Now you own it.
Right.
And but it put them on the home,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Get them authorized user on a
Right.
credit card to
Right.
begin
Right.
with, so they have a
Right. Give
good
some
score.
credit. Exactly.
You don't have to use their income,
Yeah.
and as long as obviously you got to be in the right position. But I mean, it's such a fantastic
Yep.
hack
Yep.
that you can
Yep.
do, and
Yep.
it's and
No,
like
agree.
it helps somebody's portfolio. Like, oh, now I own two homes near
Exactly.
college campuses
Right.
that I
Right.
rent out now, and I got a
Exactly.
cash flow,
Yep.
and
Yep.
and I mean, this is why I built this podcast,
Yeah.
is to really educate people. And like, everybody knows that properties, I mean, that's the one of the number one things
No.
of wealth in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad that the younger generation right now feels like it's unattainable.
I know. I have my oldest son is 24, lives and works in New York City, and he struggles with I mean, fortunately, financially, he's doing well. He's doing quite well for a 24-year-old.
Right.
But what he pays in rent for the tiniest little studio apartment, he literally had to, he had me, he doesn't have a Facebook account
Right.
because he's 24, right?
Right. Right.
Can you post this on Facebook? Can you post this sofa on Facebook Marketplace? It doesn't fit. Like his sofa
Yeah.
cannot fit
Right.
between his desk and his.
Sure.
And he's constantly, he'll find something on Zillow and he'll send it to me. Like he's really it's churning. And how can you know, I'm never going to be able to just afford something in New York City. And,
Right.
someday he might, right? But probably realistically, not in the near future. So he starts looking at multifamily properties out in New Jersey, kind of in the surrounding
Right.
communities. So he's,
Yeah.
definitely thinking, but it is very different
Yeah.
for this generation,
Yeah.
you
It
know.
is, and it's sad. I mean, I bought my first home before the crash,
Yep.
and even then, that's when prices went
I
way up,
know.
right? And
Absolutely.
it was 2006, and I just put 3.5% down,
Yep.
and I had
Yep.
this brand new
Right.
construction home,
Right. Right.
$300,000, right?
Right.
And it was 32, 2,800 square feet, no,
Yep.
24, 26, somewhere in
Something
the
like that.
mid twos,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
No finished basement,
Yep.
walkout though,
Yep. Yep.
and I mean, it was
Yeah.
fantastic. And now to build that same home, it's 450,
Hmm. Oh, at
like
least.
at
Yeah. At
least,
least.
at least
Right.
450. And
Right.
that's
Right.
linoleum.
I know. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's no tile on the floor.
No,
That's a cheap
exactly.
carpet.
Right.
Maybe not a third car
Right.
garage. Like,
Right. Yeah.
so, and what I pride myself too is I came from the auto industry and
Hmm.
going into the finance, and it's two different worlds, right?
Uh-huh.
Now my job is really to find the best, you know,
Yep.
loan for
Yep.
somebody, right?
Yep.
The best financing
Yep.
options based on their
Yep.
situation. So it's
Yep.
really helped me in that. It just makes me feel so much
Yeah.
better when I'm helping
Yeah.
people like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
all right. I wanted to talk to you
Okay.
before we close out. I wanted
Yeah.
to talk to you a little bit more about your Italy home,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So
Yeah.
like, when did you purchase this?
February. We purchased it in February. So it's a home. It's in Montalcino, which
Okay.
is a tiny little community in Tuscany. If you're into Italian wines, you've maybe heard of Brunello di Montalcino. So Montalcino is where it's the region, the area where Brunello is made.
Okay.
And we've been toying about buying in Italy for some time. And actually, what we really wanted to do was exactly what you said. We were hoping to find a little apartment, a condo to buy in Rome, and our youngest son is studying there. He's attending a 4-year
Oh,
university there.
awesome.
So our original thought was buy in Rome, put him and a few roommates in there.
Mhm.
Rome is a really expensive city. And after doing a lot of looking and actually looking at properties in Rome, what you can buy in Rome, and then finding something that was close enough to his university that was also something that we might eventually want to retire to was a little tricky. Like where it made sense for him to live and students to live really wasn't where we necessarily wanted to live. So we were vacationing with some friends from Minnesota in October, and we took a trip up to Montalcino and we stayed at a really great Airbnb, and we love that area. My husband is passionate about Italian wine in particular. And we were just chatting with our Airbnb host and kind of, you walk like we all do, right? You walk by the real estate brokerage and you kind of look at the pictures in the window, and we were chatting with our Airbnb host about properties, and she starts rattling off all these properties she knew was for sale.
Yeah.
And she mentioned one, and she told us about the location and told us about the house and said, I know the owners, and it's not on the market, but they're going to sell. If you want, I could connect you. Maybe you could take a peek.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And we were like, absolutely. So one thing or the other, we got this appointment scheduled, but it was the morning that we were departing. So we left our friends, kind of standing out in front of the Airbnb with all the suitcases, right? And you're in
Right.
the historical center, so you can't always, drive in all these places. And we popped on down and we spent about 15 minutes in this place. And it's in the historical center, but kind of right on the edge. And it looks out over it's called the Val d'Orcia, which is this beautiful valley with vineyards. It's so beautiful. And the owners, a long story, but it was kind of interesting because the owners were originally from Rome. So there was that connection right away. And they own a Brunello winery, which was really cool. And they were selling. And we spent 15 minutes in the property and we're completely in love with it. So we were literally returning. So we kind of said, we'll stay in touch. Here's our, email and whatnot. And got back to, we'd also sort of talked to her, and said, what do you have a price? Right? Do you
Right.
have a price in mind? And she said, well, we're having it appraised, and the appraiser said it's worth about this much, but like I get it. I know how much work there is. So we're kind of thinking this other number. And it was one of those, like that other number, it was like, keep a straight face, keep a straight face.
Right.
Because if it
Right.
really was that number, like we're in,
In.
right? So we kind of go back to the US and we run, we do all of our math and we run our numbers and we do a little, research on vacation rental
Hmm.
income because we probably will use it for vacation rental
Sure.
income for a while. And we emailed her. We said, we're in. Like, if you're interested, we're interested. This is a whole other podcast, but we'd gone through the ringer of whether or not we could get a mortgage in Italy.
Right.
It's possible, but so difficult and so slow that
Okay.
we said, we're gonna free up some assets here
Yep.
and we'll come in cash, right? And I mean, it wasn't true cash because we're pulling
Sure.
from our HELOC and things.
Sure.
It's a
Right.
combination
Right.
of things
Right. Right.
there. But
Right.
as far as they're concerned, we'll come in with cash. You don't need to pay an agent.
Hmm.
If you're interested, we're in. And she came back to us and said, we're interested, but the family, because the family owned that, like the family isn't in agreement with the price I gave you. And we're like, oh, of course not, right? Right.
Right.
So she said, let's wait for this appraisal to come in and the whole thing. And so the appraisal comes in, and the appraisal comes in even higher than she'd originally said. And the appraised value that would have been pushing it for us. And so I was like, okay, too good to be true, moving on. And my husband's like, let's wait. So we basically came back, we ran all of our numbers all over again. Pro tip, remember to convert from euro to dollars when you're running numbers, because for a second we were like, wait a second, we need to, but so we basically came back and gave her a price that was right about in the middle
Yeah.
between what she'd said and the appraised value. And I did not think they would accept it. And my
Yeah.
husband said, I bet they will. And sure enough, they did.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it was fun. So then we found our realtor, and I did what I would really not want a client to do to me,
Right.
which was to say, Mauro, I found a house. I negotiated the price. I just need you to write the purchase agreement. And
Right.
he was like, okay, Cara, I will do that. He's like, but you have to let me do my due diligence on the
Right.
property, of
Right.
course. And then it was funny because he thought we were overpaying. He hadn't seen the property, but
Right.
he thought based on comps, we were overpaying and that the appraiser was crazy, and I personally thought, okay, you're pulling numbers and you're putting us here. The appraiser's putting us here. I actually think we're a little bit in the middle, and we
Right.
might be pushing the price point a little bit, but we've looked at every single property on the market,
Right.
and this one has potential that the others don't.
Sure.
So yeah. So we closed in February, and that was crazy. Italian closings are interesting. And now we're working to try to get renovations started.
Right.
And it's so slow.
But
It's
and this is an 1823 built
1823.
home.
Yep,
Like
1823. Yep. Yeah.
that's
1823. Yep. It's its own home, which we really like. It doesn't
yeah.
have shared walls. It has its own little yard,
Hmm.
main floor, upper floor, and then it's what we would call here a lower level walkout. It's kind
Right.
of built on a hill that leads to the valley. So there are garden level rooms, and that's the gist of all of our work right now because we want to convert. We actually want to relocate the kitchen to the garden level, turn the kitchen into another bedroom with a bathroom.
Okay.
Um, but there's a lot of it's actually really interesting because building code is pretty international. So
Okay.
the same building code that we deal with every day in our remodeling
Sure.
business
Sure.
applies there. So things like, ceiling height and glazing requirements, right? How much natural light are you bringing in?
Mhm.
And all of these sort of things that we're working through. And it's in the historical center, and they're very protective
I
of
was
the,
gonna say 1823,
yeah,
201 years
yeah,
old,
yeah.
right?
We asked them right away, can we blow out the roof and put a great big rooftop deck up there looking over the valley? And they were like, no.
No.
Okay, I get it,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming that, I mean, stone and
yeah.
like,
It's stone. The exterior has like a stucco, like a
sure.
terracotta facade
Okay.
on three of the four walls, and it's stone. Exposed ceilings with wooden beams,
Right.
natural terracotta floors on the upstairs. The downstairs, so the house is actually in pretty good shape, but it's kind of like an 80s renovation, right?
Okay.
So it doesn't have the
I
look
was
that
gonna
we're
say over
going
200
for.
years, there's
Yeah,
been some renovations, right?
exactly. So it doesn't quite have the look we're going for. So the other funny thing is that there's a bedroom on the upstairs where you can clearly tell that there's a window that had been walled in.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's this window that looks over, like a United
Right.
Nations protected, right? It's like,
Right.
why did they wall this window in?
Right.
I'm almost positive that the grandma who lived there, she just needed more wall space
You
for
wanted
her
to,
armoire.
okay.
And she just did. And,
Yeah.
she's like, I've looked at this valley my whole life. I need,
Right.
I
I
need
could go
storage.
outside.
Right, exactly. So we need to open that window. We're hoping they'll let us open another window directly below it.
Sure.
And then most of the rest, we're adding bathrooms,
Yeah.
adding
Yeah.
bathrooms and heated flooring. My husband would
Okay.
love to eliminate gas
Yeah.
entirely. That's
Yeah.
been interesting because we put heated flooring in all the time,
Right.
but we have this, DTRA, like electric sort of
Yeah.
system, and they have a hydraulic system in Italy. And we're working with our project manager. We're like, no, 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 like that's not what we want.
Right.
And they're like, well, electrical costs are high. We know, but
Right.
this is still what we want.
Right.
So
Right.
figuring out those, it's
I
been a
got
lot of fun.
electric, my tile in my kitchen is electric,
Yeah,
heated.
heated. Yeah,
And it's just,
hands down.
like,
It's
it's so
so
good.
worth it. Yeah,
Wintertime Maverick,
I
he's
know.
around here
He
somewhere.
loves it,
He
right?
just, we come out from
Yeah,
outside, he's laying by his
yeah,
dish,
exactly.
it's there, so
Yeah,
that's fantastic. I mean,
it's a lot of fun.
what a cool like experience to
Yeah,
actually be able to do
yeah.
that too with
It
a 200-year-old
it's so
in that
amazing.
region
Yeah,
and
there's a
like,
cool little brick in one of the downstairs rooms were originally the stalls, and there's a cool little kind of brick that's plastered into the wall that has 1823.
oh, that's
Yeah, it's
fantastic.
really neat.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it's
Awesome.
fun.
Well,
Yeah,
Cara, it's been fantastic having you
it's
on the
been so much
show.
fun.
I hope that we can do more business together.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
look forward to, you have Facebook,
I
right?
have
So
Facebook. Yes, you
I
have a
got
Facebook.
to, I don't think we're friends yet, but I'm
We
gonna
have
have
to
to
be.
make that.
You know.
And once you
Yep.
get more pictures of that
Perfect.
new house,
Yeah, definitely.
I'm excited to see
Great.
that. And
Yeah.
for all of you out there, Cara is very knowledgeable, very personable. I recommend if you have any questions, I mean, she can help with the contracting needs,
Great.
which is actually, and not to get too far
No, but
down this road, but
yeah,
we have one-time close
yeah,
options for
exactly.
construction loans and
Yes.
purchases.
Yep.
I just did 203
A rehab.
203K,
Yep.
well, a rehab loan, not 203, that's FHA, but
Okay.
we
Yep.
just did a rehab loan for
Yep.
someone building a,
Yep.
complete addition,
Yep.
288,000
Nice.
on their home.
Yeah.
So Cara can help you with that. Please like and subscribe. All of our contact information is going to be below. But thank you very much,
Thank
Cara.
you. Thanks for having me. This
Absolutely.
was fun.
Take care. Thank you.